It's Saturday, August 22nd, and this is episode 1 of the High Yield Podcast. This episode, Ravi and I are joined by Ricky from Dust Gaming. In the gold base for discussion today is foreign team leagues in Starcraft 2. Stay tuned.
SCV ready. What's going on?
Here with StarCraft discussions worth their weight in gold, it's the High Yield Podcast with your hosts Troy Pavlik and Fear Dragon.
Say, you got a real pretty mouth.
So with me today, I've got Ravi, Fear Dragon Parikh, the creator of Breaking Out and the famous Reddit posts that have fairly little value, according to himself. How are you doing, Ravi?
I was doing great until that intro, but I'm glad that you are pushing the idea that the most successful thing I've done in esports is making images in Paint in under 2 minutes. So thank you for that, Troy. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm pretty good. We'll get to me later. We'll move on to our second guest here. We've joined by Ricky from Dust League. He's joining us to talk about team leagues today. So Ricky, how are you doing? What have you been up to this week?
Not too much, man. I'm actually super excited you invited me onto the show. Didn't expect it, but I guess here I am.
All right. Myself, I'm pretty stoked. I've been working on StarCraft Jeopardy this week, and we're going to have some StarCraft Jeopardy coming up soon. And I can't say who is almost confirmed today, but we've got some pretty cool people coming on this week. Cooler than myself and Ravi.
I mean, I almost won one of your episodes of StarCraft Jeopardy, so I don't know what more you want from me, man.
Yeah, you almost won, and you almost didn't throw away all your points on a question about your best friend that was obvious.
Hey, so what's our topic for today, Troy?
Tonight we'll be talking about foreign team leagues and generally what makes a good foreign team league, what doesn't make for a good foreign team league, and the idea of how we can project foreign team leagues onto the scene and make them an integral part of the scene, if we can, can't, that sort of thing. I think we're going to jump right into it, and we'll start off with Ravi. What do you think makes a good foreign team league? What are the attributes that make a team league successful in the foreign scene?
Oh, so there are a lot of different things that we could talk about on this, and it's a really, really broad topic. But, you know, good foreign team league, it kind of depends on like what your objectives are. I think one thing that we kind of discussed before we came up with a topic for this show, or we finally sat down and started recording this now, is, you know, what kind of like team, what skill level are you aiming at? Are you aiming for that kind of lower level GM NA team league, or are you aiming for like that pro level Acer Team Story Cup style? Maybe it's a foreign run team league, but you have Korean players or teams involved. Like there's so many different levels of it. And I think you really have to start thinking about like what your objective is before you can even go into how is the team league going to be run.
Are you saying Korean team leagues are exclusively better than foreign team leagues?
No, I think he's trying to say, like, I agree with that a lot, actually, because when you look at something like Clan Wars, you would expect like a really good team. You wouldn't expect like a Diamond or a Master or a GM team that's like unknown to be in there. You'd expect like stars. So like when you're opening your team league, there's so many levels. There's like so many levels of teams and calibers. And I mean, there's leagues that like Wardy's League where they even merge teams together. There's a lot of, it's just like variance, I guess. I agree with that. So you got to kind of have it in your head. How do you want this league to pan out in the long run? What do you want it to look like? And they're also
Exactly.
different.
I think that's a good segue into one of our first topics for tonight. And that's the question, is there actually a difference between the Grandmaster level and the pro level in the context of American or foreign team leagues? And you sort of just gave a brief answer to that in that you think there is sort of, there's a difference between the Grandmaster level and the high level of teams you expect in Clan Wars. Granted, we did have Team Ascension in Clan Wars. Do you rate Team Ascension as pro level?
So in my mind, Team Ascension is a community team, and I don't consider them a pro level team. I consider them a semi-pro team, but I will say that they've been getting a lot stronger, like over the past, I want to say like 6 to 8 months. They've just gotten, it's like a mix between they've like gotten better players either through IVD, or their players have just straight up gotten better, or they've acquired like better players. Like for example, BioIce comes to mind, a little bit of personal bias here because he won my tournament, the most recent instance of my tournament and is also, going to hell it's about time and all this kind of good stuff. But Team Ascension, I would say, is more of a community team. I wouldn't really consider it a pro level team. And I think there is a big difference between GM level and pro level. Now, it's a little bit harder to see in North America, though, because there aren't that many pro players in North America. I mean, the one player that I would consider a pro player, but isn't even full-time anymore, is Puck. Puck is no longer full-time. He's in school, but I still consider him like probably one of the closest people we have to a pro player in North America.
I think specifically one thing to address is you're right. In the foreign scene, there really aren't that many pro players. It actually came up when we were preparing this show and going through like a bunch of the different team leagues. I was going through and categorizing the team leagues in the past, and Ravi was getting mad at me because I was putting a bunch of team leagues in the amateur section instead of the pro level section. And my chief qualification for putting them in the amateur section was EG wasn't involved.
What are you basing that off of, though? Because there's a lot of teams that, I mean, I don't know. EG's not the same EG it was before, I think. I mean, they only have like 5 players now, right? So
that's the thing. It's sort of just an intuition thing. It's not a objective look, because if you actually look at EG's performance these days, they have Huck and Xenocide, they're good players, but they're not getting the round of 8 in WCS anymore.
Right. But if you put those players against, let's say like 90% of the players that would be in an NA team league, they would probably do well. I mean, EG is not the same EG they were, obviously, but there's a lot of teams that are coming out like Root, Flipside. Those are 2 that just come to the top of my head right now that are probably on par, or at least have players that are competing with their players at events and stuff. Because it used to, I think it used to be like back in the day, like if you played against an EG player, you lost. Like if you went to a LAN and you had like an EG player against you, you lost. But now it's more like I think more foreigner players that are in North America are now like, oh, okay, I'm playing EG Suppy, for example, EG Huck. I think I can beat him. Maybe they don't, but they have more confidence, and some of them have beaten them. So I think there's that stigma of like, oh, I'm playing EG, I'm going to lose. I think that's dying down.
I would agree with that. Yeah. One thing that I also realized, and it's a little bit different because we're trying to categorize an entire team or even a team league versus just individual players. But one thing that I had to do for breaking out was I had to make some distinctions of you are a player that is established and well-known versus you're like the up-and-coming player, like that nobody knows. And like making those kind of distinctions between that or even just between semi-pro and pro is really difficult. It's really difficult to come up with a concrete set of rules that you can just apply to everyone and have results that you're always happy with where people end up falling on that.
I really think it's easy, though, to say, like, well, they have like 1 or 2 good players, so they're a great team, because so many leagues nowadays are doing all-kill format, where you could literally rely on one person to carry your team.
Oh, can we talk about that, actually?
I think we need to talk about that. We need to talk about that right now.
So the all-kill format, the reason why we have all-kill format, it has, I think, a lot less to do with the like level of league or anything, the skill level involved. It has a lot to do with, and it's something I talked about with Wardy. The reason why Wardy's SC2 Improved Team League uses an all-kill format is because it has the lowest probability of having a bunch of no-shows show up. If you have a pro league, this is the reason why, the number one reason why we don't see foreigner team leagues that are in the pro league format is because if you have to commit your players a week in advance or even like a couple of days in advance to playing their match, it's still going to be days in advance. And if they don't show up, you just lose that match. You just lose a score or a map in that team league, in that match. So instead, what you end up having is you have an all-kill format. It's like Ricky was saying, you can have that one all-star player that just happens to carry you through, especially if you're like an Evil Geniuses. You just toss out someone like Jadong or something like, hey, awesome. Like, you know what? Doesn't matter that you only had 2 players there, because you had the power player that almost it covers up the mistake of nobody else showed up. It's no longer an issue because of that. And I think that's the reason why, like, most of the team leagues that we see that are kind of successful in the foreign scene are all kill format. We don't have pro league formats that are succeeding.
We used to.
Even Starcraft, yeah.
This is getting to one of the significant pain points for me personally, because I've run SC2 CTL 2 seasons, and it was big.
I loved it.
My claim to fame, the largest StarCraft 2 team league globally at its time.
That was bold, but I still liked it. I liked it.
But For the first season was run in all kill, and it was a success in every way. I was completely happy with every aspect of it, except that it was all kill. I didn't like all kill because, like Ravi said, you can put in a single good player and they can carry the team. For the most parts in the league, that didn't happen, but the global finals were shit because it was ESC Icy Box versus Team Gravity. Team Gravity had put up great shows throughout the entire season. They'd beaten this conglomeration, Young Money, Cash Money Billionaires, which had players like Massa and Guitar Cheese on it and fairly competent players. And Gravity won. So Gravity were these underdogs that really had a great showing. And in the global finals, Icy Box ESC Gaming, they lost the first 3 or 4 maps, and then they sent out Showtime, who reverse all killed. And like it wasn't close because Showtime was a round of 16 WCS Europe champion at that point. Like he was just a level above the other players, and all kill format allowed him to win. So for season 2, we decided, hey, we're going to implement a pro league format in this foreign team league. And it was the worst mistake I could have made in the entire universe. The number of matches that were a simple 4-0 walkover were 32 out of 109. 30% of all games in the team league were complete 4-0 walkover in the pro league format. Players just didn't show up. Like most of their team just didn't show up for their matches. The number of teams, we had 43 Masters, Grandmaster teams in the league, and the number of distinct teams that gave up a 4-0 walkover was 19 out of 43. So 44% of all teams gave up a 4-0 walkover. So it wasn't just one team. It was across the board. All teams are guilty of this. They could not schedule. And the most astounding stat that I had was the number of matches with at least one game being a forfeit was 68 out of 109, or 62% of all matches had at least one forfeit due to a player no showing.
I think that's just the times, though, because I remember when I first made the team 3 years ago in 2012, we joined ESEA, and they had a Pro League format, and everyone showed up. But I think that's because the game was so new, and teams were so looking forward to team leagues that they just showed up because they wanted to play. But nowadays, I think the consistency of team leagues is so bad that teams don't really know how to react within team leagues. Like, I doubt any NA team is really practicing for anything right now, if at all. So it's hard to tell a player, okay, well, we're starting a team league up in a month. Get good, because they don't really know, they don't really expect it coming. And a lot of players just aren't prepared anymore. A lot of players have full-time jobs now, where they used to be, a year or two younger with just, 14 hours a day on the computer. I mean, not everyone's super old, but I'm just saying it's an example. And I think like teams just don't know how to react to the idea of a team league anymore. And they don't really understand the scheduling. But before, I mean, ESCA, back in 2012 when Starcraft 2 was probably, well, when it first came out, when it was really big, like teams were all over that. Teams were showing up. Teams were down to practice. Players wanted to join teams that had like houses just to get the better practice in. And I think now there's no consistency, so nobody knows what to do.
That's such a good point, and I'm actually really glad that you brought up the topic or like the example of people have full-time jobs and stuff, because one of the strangest phenomenons, it's so hard to explain, is if you look actually not at semi-pros or pro-level players, if you look at the amateurest of amateur, I'm talking after-hours gaming league, I'm talking collegiate star league, I'm talking like Chobo team league, it's astounding. There are so few walkovers. After Hours Gaming League is such a great example because it is quite literally a league made for people who work at big tech companies, have full-time jobs in highly demanding fields. And I've found that the number of walkovers, and they have a Pro League style format also, and the number of walkovers that they have is unbelievably low. These bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamonds, sometimes masters, and I think like maybe 1 or 2 GMs ever in like the league, they just care about the match. Like they signed up for it and they have an intention of playing in it, and they don't actually even get anything out of it besides the fun and the joy of like sometimes being casted and actually being able to play StarCraft, because the victory, the prize pool, for those who don't know, for the After Hours Gaming League is you get to donate a certain amount of money, like it's $5,000 or something that the HGL puts up, to a charity of your choice. You're not getting the money. they don't even have a live finals anymore, which they used to, which was an added kind of bonus, but like they don't even have that anymore. People just show up because they want to. And it makes you really wonder, like, if these people who are doing these kind of like, high demanding job, tech jobs, etc., they can show up for these matches because they want to and they make time for it. What is stopping the other people? Like,
I think there's a couple key points that your example misses. Generally, the people that are entering After Hours Gaming League exist together in another fashion. They'll all work in the same office. They can talk about it and they can motivate each other.
Well,
if you don't show up to your game, your office mates are going to CC the entire company and say, this Chobo didn't show up, fire him.
Why doesn't that exist for a team? Because I will say, like, most of the HGL teams, they are for big companies, like, for example, Amazon or Microsoft or IBM. These are companies where the players on the team are only there, they only know each other, or a majority of them will only know each other through the fact that they are on the team together, that they got together and formed the team. They don't know each other because they work directly next to each other. They're big companies and they're kind of finding each other through the AHGL. So why doesn't that same like sense of bonding or like team friendship or whatever, like shaming, exist for the team leagues as well, or the teams?
It's so awesome you said that, because I've always been so jealous of like those, the Chobo team league where they have like diamond teams and platinum. I've been so jealous because I joined one just for fun, and I forget the team name, I don't know, but I joined one and they would have matches whenever. I don't think it was a set date, but they would have like 18 players saying, can I play? Can I play? And that was something I was so jealous of, because I have like a 12-man roster, but I'm like literally holding hands and trying to like, come on, come to the match. Like the game's at 8, and just like and players still show up late. And it's just like to have 18 players when you're only fielding 4 that match, just beg you to play. It's something I've always been jealous of, and they have that. But NA teams, or really most teams that are call themselves semi-pro, pro, amateur, that are trying to do something, they don't have that. And I think it's just discipline that the players don't have.
I actually want to bring up something that recently got talked about on a podcast, SC2 Remax, I think it was, where Huck was talking about, in North America specifically, because I think all three of us are mostly involved in the North American scene. A lot of our experiences are from the North American scene. And in North America specifically, Huck was saying there's not a lot of incentives to go pro right now, or to like really invest all of your time. There's no real way to sustain yourself economically as a pro player.
I don't think many NA players play StarCraft 2 for a living anymore, to be honest with you. I think most of them know that they have to work a job, or they get, they get money from their parents or something. I don't think anyone's really playing like, I'm gonna get money from StarCraft 2. Not anymore, at least.
Ready to change gears. Let's look at the panel. Ricky, what are your top 2 team leagues that have been run back to 2010, whatever? Top 2 foreign team leagues.
Okay, I'll tell you the 2 leagues I liked. I liked your league because the content was so easy to find, and it was so organized. Like I could, I remember I think I was playing Gravity in some match, and I really wanted to beat them. And I was able to look up every match, because like all your matches were like dated. Your match reports were like 671, 682, and I would literally spend like 8, like not that long, well 3 hours, but it was fun. And I would go like 567, and I'd stumble upon a Gravity week match, and I'd be like, okay, boom, and I would see who they played and stuff. And it was so easy for me to do my job on trying to beat teams. I think we still lost them, but it was so easy to do my job and try to like prepare for matches. But then I also loved UASL, that the matches were the same time every week, so I wouldn't have to go through the hassle of trying to schedule with teams. And some teams just hated each other at the time, and they would just purposely try to screw with each other. So trying to schedule would be this huge conflict. But with UASL, they were saying it was every Tuesday at, I think, 9 or something. Tuesday at 9, and it was easy for me to say, okay guys, if you work, just book that off, Tuesday 9 every week, boom boom boom, put that in your head. And it was so easy to do that. But I love the way that you guys put out content. It's definitely something we're trying to do with our league, and that we took notes on. And then UASL, obviously, we took notes on running matches at the same time. It's just a lot easier.
One thing before we move on to Ravi that I think I'll bring up, because I think it's very important for team leagues, and maybe you're hiding replays, but I think putting replays out in a clear, defined format generally makes team leagues a whole lot better, and it enhances the practice aspect of a team league, which I believe should be a goal of every team league. You should be trying to get the members to practice for their matches each week. I played in the SC2 CTL with my Diamond team, and we just had one guy. He goes by TN, but he was in Europe, and he would go through our opponents' entire match histories. They were all on GG Tracker. He would just put a Google Doc that said, okay, this guy, in 9 out of 10 games, he's 2-raxed. You're going to want to make an early bunker and just hard counter that build. And when I did it, he 2-raxed me. The research was completely valuable, and I think that lends a lot of value, especially in a pro league format. But moving on, Ravi, your top 2.
So my top 2 are possibly a little bit biased on this first one since I was involved with it, but the Deimos Esports Team League, I think I've been involved, especially with a lot of North American team leagues. I've done casting for Underrated Team League, UASL, CSL, HGL, like all these different kinds of team leagues. And DETL really had their shit together. They knew when the matches were happening. They had like actual teams showing up, and they knew we were smart enough to do the all kill format to avoid that kind of pro league versus all kill format kind of problem that we were talking about earlier on. And the biggest thing that they did was 2 things. They like really knew how important the broadcast was. And again, this comes in like a little bit of personal bias as a broadcaster. That's what's really important to me. But they not only broadcast every single match was broadcasted. And, you know, they had an like casting team, et cetera, to like make sure it happened every single time. But they also output additional content to get word out about the actual league and get people interested. They would have write-ups on what happened in every single one of the matches that happened. They would release those and post those on Reddit, etc. They would do highlight videos, the top 5 plays from like that previous week of matches, like every single week without fail. And it was a really, really well done kind of thing. But I think the biggest problem that they did have was, you know, they invested a lot of time and effort into making all this happen, but it still wasn't enough for them they didn't get the viewership that they needed to get another sponsor to, you know, continue on with not only the team league, but also the team, as Deimos Esports did disband almost immediately afterwards. I think it was, a lot of people say like it was like the Hail Mary play for them to try and stick around as a team. I thought it was a really well run team league. And because of that, I kind of say from a broadcast perspective, it was a really successful team league. And that's why it's one of my top 2. But on the other hand, I guess like counterpoint is it wasn't successful in the sense that it wasn't sustainable.
I'm of the same opinion about the Deimos Esports Team League. I thought it was a very good success. It was averaging about 350 concurrent viewers with peaks at like 600 and lows a bit lower than that. But I thought...
Hey, I think peaks for the finals, if I recall, were like around 1,000 something.
Yeah, the finals had very good viewerships, but like the regular season, because it was round robin 8 teams, so it was a pretty consistent broadcast, and they were getting 350 to 500, and I thought that was good. I thought that was successful, and I thought that was all they could hope for. And apparently it wasn't, because like you said, this was the Hail Mary play, and it didn't turn out to get all the sponsors that they needed to keep the team going. But is there an unrealistic expectation here? Like, should we expect team leagues to perform better than that? If the sponsors weren't flocking to sponsor that amount of viewers, is that okay?
Expect or need. It's 2 different things. Yeah, in terms of sustainability, like there is a certain level that everyone needs to hit. Everyone has a different level that they need to hit to stay sustainable and be able to do another season of that team league. You know, some have it easier than others. Some have it harder than others. Some have less funding. Some require more funding. It's all a big kind of relative thing. But like, I think in their case, it wasn't a matter of expectation. It was a matter of necessity.
Yeah, and they set their bar so high. Like, can you honestly expect them to do the same thing for season 2? Like, the manpower, I can't even imagine the manpower that it took to put out the content they did. They did such a good job, but they probably, like, killed themselves trying to do that.
It was a team of, like, 3 people. Like, the besides the actual broadcasting, it was a team of basically 3 to 4 people. Like, it was one person doing like the write-ups, another person who would just pour his heart and soul, and actually is now at Team Gravity, Technotrans, would pour his heart and soul into like editing together like the highlight videos. You had like, you know, someone else running the league and that kind of stuff, like one or other two people like helping with admin, but it was like a very small group of people who were just very dedicated and passionate. So yeah, like I think I agree. They did kill themselves.
Yeah, and I only experienced DTL as a fan. Unfortunately, Dust didn't get the invite, rip.
No.
But as a fan, I love the content for sure, because I think it was the first league that actually Complexity ended up joining.
Oh, they did fantastic too. They put up some really great games. Actually, that's another thing that I really liked about DETL, because they also understood one thing, and that's that it's important to distinguish yourself even just little bits. Like that's what all that extra excess content was about, was distinguishing yourself from like any other team league that was being run or had been run in the past. And they would even do small things like, okay, we're going to have a totally normal map pool, but we're going to include 2 maps that nobody had or very few people had seen. And it was one map was a map that ended up being put into the ladder map pool later. It was King Sejong Station before it was in the ladder map pool. And the other map was, it's escaping my mind. The last map was a map that was just destructible rock heaven. To get to your opponent, you had to kill off 4 sets of destructible rocks. It was absolute insanity, but it lent to really, really cool and interesting games. And also, I think the destructible rocks like self-destructed 15 minutes in or something, some weird rules like that. But we saw like really cool games. And I bring that up because I remember people on the Complexity would especially do a great job with that. That was like QXC's map, and having those kind of interesting things, those small differences that distinguish yourself, allows you to set up for really, really cool stories. And I think that's what you need to do, is you need to get people excited about your event, whatever it is, team league, individual league, whatever. Like, you need to get people excited if you want people to be interested and watch it.
Not to toot my own horn, but not only did Complexity play in the SC2 CTL, but we also had community maps. So, I mean, the advantages of DETL, who knows?
That was so salty. Oh, man. That hurt my feelings.
Well, okay, my number 2... It's I've had a really hard time deciding between the two.
Whoa, was that just your number 1?
That was just my number 1.
Holy
DETL.
crap!
But my number 2, it was a really hard toss up between 2 of them. After I was Gaming League and Starcraft,
you just gave me 3. Come on, Ravi.
I ultimately decided upon After Hours Gaming League, and it goes back to like what I was saying before and how impressed I am with how well they run everything. And let me tell you, if you want to talk about well run like team leagues, that is probably the best one, because it's almost entirely automated. The entire process, I would say, for After Hours Gaming League, for those who don't know, is automated. They have a website that they have, someone built out. They put in a bunch of money initially to get this fantastic website running, and nobody has to do anything to manage the team league, except one person contacts all the people who are doing community casting for the games, and they attach like links from the YouTube to the actual matches. That's it. The submissions for like the lineups for each match, the scheduling, everything is done automated through the website, and it allows for communication between the 2 teams and everything. It's a fantastic system. So just hands down, amazingly well-run thing. You have the teams that I mentioned before, just astoundingly just show up for their matches. Like, what a crazy idea is that everyone just shows up for your matches most of the time. But also just even doing like the small things and realizing, the importance of that recognition. Now, obviously they had the advantage of being an organization run by Day 9, but it feels pretty damn good, because I remember one thing that stands out clearly in my mind was I was doing one of the breakout invitationals, and I had Day 9 as a co-caster for the finals, and even like the semi-pro, who I think it was maybe Intense, and Intense said, like, that you've made it when Day 9 is finally casting you. Like, it actually meant something to him. A player who was in GM, who was actually beating players like Showtime to bring him up, since we were talking about how good he was earlier on, like, has actually accomplished things. But it still means a lot when you have like a big name broadcaster like broadcasting you. Like, there's that idea of fame, and HGL also nails that with having Day 9 doing like the finals and everything else, and like doing occasional matches. Like, there's that added level of like incentive for players. Like, that's not monetary. I think that's such a well done and well run league. So that's definitely my number 2.
Well, Troy's league had automated systems.
It did.
It's true.
It did.
As running SC2 CTL, that was one of the things. It was non-negotiable. I looked at the time it would take to actually run this on paper in a Google spreadsheet, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm a software developer. I'm going to fix this. Do you need to do that to run a team league? Because if you look at the team leagues that exist in the foreign scene, a lot of them die. And a lot of them die for the reason of, this is draining my soul. I want to die. There's so much of my life is going into making this work. And a lot of that can be automated away. We live in a wonderful age of software. If people aren't automating their team leagues, are they doing it wrong?
I agree. It's a huge problem in the sense that there are a lot of team leagues that did just die. Like UASL, I think, is a really good example between like some random like bits of, drama between people in actually managing the stuff, but it was about management and, putting in work and stuff. And it was so much work to manage that, and it wasn't sustainable. So I don't know. I think it's a case by case thing.
Moving on, Ricky, you run Dust League, the team league hosted by Dust Gaming. Do you mind giving us a brief overview of your league?
Sure. Honestly, it wasn't even a spontaneous thing. This is something that we wanted to do for like a year. We just never got around to it. And at the time, there were a few team leagues going. I think there was always the Ascension going, and then some other leagues, but so we never really wanted to compete with them at the time because we didn't really want to burn any bridges or because at the time it was so hard to schedule matches. If you were going to open a team league, like there's this on a Tuesday and everyone schedules this for the weekend, and then there's this always going on. So it was so hard to like pick a time. But it was honestly during the downtime that we decided, you know what, like we haven't played a team league in like 2-3 months, and it's getting to like the end of the year. There's no LANs. And we want games. So we're like, you know what? We're just going to open it. That's it. We're just going to open it. And we decided to just put it out there. A lot of it was like last minute planning. And then we're like, you know what? We'll get like 8 teams showing up for season 1. And then we'll work from there. We'll try to get some more teams. We ended up getting like 22. And we had no idea what to do. We're like, okay, the league is only like the website only does like 1 group. So we're like, we have to somehow get 2 groups. Like we were so shocked by the turnout, but a lot of it's just been spontaneous. But the whole goal is to just get games. Like we don't need numbers. We would like them, but like we're not like reliant. It's not a necessity. We're just going to put in as much time as we can. Week 1 ran smoothly, playing wise. We just got to work on content and stuff, but the goal is to just get games all the time because teams are literally getting bored. I know my team is so bored. And when I have like the Koreans on my team that aren't usually as active going like, hey, can I play something? I'm like, okay, sick. Yes, you can, so it was just spontaneous. And the entire goal is to just have games for people, and let's just keep playing games. So the whole idea of this league is we're just going to keep running. We're just going to keep running. We got really lucky with our prize pool for season 1. $500 is not bad, in my opinion. We initially put up 200, but we got some generous man, Jeremy, to help us out. So honestly, it's going pretty good, and that's the main goal. It's not to get sponsors. It's not to do much. It's just to get games for the teams. This is for the teams.
So I wanted to actually ask you about this because it seems pretty relevant. We've talked a lot about, for example, DETL was really shooting for the sponsors, and that meant that they wanted a lot of viewers. Something like your league has a very, very different objective. I know that one thing that you said to me in private, hopefully I'm not going to be upsetting you when I say this. I don't think it's anything super secret, but you said like, I hope that our team gets absolutely crushed. I hope that some teams just come in and are playing so well that it motivates all of my players to play better. And it sounds like that is like one of the really big objectives, but like, how do you judge at the end of the day, like that this was a success?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot related to my team. I was surprised. Like, I didn't have a lot of managers on friends on Skype. Like when I started adding all the captains and stuff, I was like, who are you? I'm learning a lot about the scene. So for one, like it humbles me on how much I thought I knew. about, like, there's so many NA teams. Like, I only thought 8 would sign up, honestly. I had a list. I was like, if we get these 8, I'm so happy. And we got like 22 signups, and even Exile 5 from Australia signed up. Like, that's nuts, you know? It's like, wow. So it's really humbling on like what I'm learning from a lot of people, and it's getting me involved with the community more, because so many of these people I never talked to before. And now, like, I'm talking to them, so it's getting me more involved with them, and now they start to know, like, who my team is a little bit more and what we do. It helps my players so much because they were so bored, and it just gives them a reason to play. Because honestly, this year's been a big flop for StarCraft 2. Like, for events, you know, like, it's been really bad. Like, usually our team plans on going to an event every year, and that's the big hype. Like, that's why we practice, that's why we do that. So when we have like team leagues, and they're not very frequent, like we would have. Every year, I think, there's been like a 4 to 5 month downtime between team leagues where there's just nothing happening. And that's when we get huge players retiring or just stop playing, and players lose interest in the game. And it's just, yeah, so there's tons of benefits for us doing this. I did say that I want our team to get crushed. I still want them to get crushed. I know we play Exile 5 next week. And I don't know, because I don't know, my team's kind of cocky. So I like to put them down a little level, you know? So it's just, if we're running over every team, that it's not really fun, you know. Like, I want our players to get humbled a little bit, get beat, and then they start to realize, okay, well, maybe I should be practicing more, maybe I should be playing more, maybe I should be taking this more seriously, and, you know, maybe I should stop playing Counter-Strike Go.
On that note, you say that a success for Dust is your team itself getting better. The rest of the team league's sort of like a corollary. It's just, I want my team to get better, and I want to do it through practice with these other teams. What are you doing differently from, because a lot of team leagues have failed. Well, all team leagues have failed.
Yeah. When I made this team with Tom, the co-owner, I was supposed to give him a shout out a long time ago, but I'm going to do it now. Tom, what's up, baby? When I made the team with Tom, our whole entire goal was to not die. We literally started from the bottom. We started from nothing, and our entire goal was to not die. And anything we got was a bonus, not a necessity. This league won't die as long as our team's alive. We're going to run every season with no downtime. I'm thinking, like, you know, we have the 1 week playoff or 2 week playoff or 1 day playoff day. We haven't decided what we want to do there. And then 1 week to recuperate and sign up, and then we're back at it. Like, we're just going to keep going. And that's just the way we run our team. Like, it's just stable, and the goal is to not die. So what are we doing differently? There's a lot of things we're trying to do differently. Like, this league is so beta, and when you make the website, right, and you get the teams to sign up, actually, even before you get the teams to sign up, when you make the website and you're looking at it, you're like, perfect, I've covered everything. And then as soon as you get the signups, you're like, oh, I forgot this. As soon as the week 1 starts, you're like, I forgot that. And what are we doing differently? We're trying to do a lot differently. We're trying to put out coverage in terms of, like, can you watch the league, or do you have to just open a Wikipedia to find results? We really do want matches to be streamed. DTL killed it with they streamed every match. Every match could be watched. There was a VOD for every match. You could always watch everything. They killed it. But it's just so hard to find the manpower to do that. And honestly, I've never really tried to look. But I think the goal is to always put out results, like, so we know what's going on, so people can check out the league and check who's winning what, and because the website's based around coverage. Like, if you look at the website, we didn't really do much for week 1 because we underestimated the manpower we actually had for week 1. We were so understaffed. I know our one guy that was helping us out is in Dubai right now, and he's not available. And then it was just me and Tom, and I was running my own team's match, and it was just so hard to coordinate being an admin, putting the content out, and running my team to win. So it was just so hard, but it's something we're going to work on. It's so hard to run a team league. It really is. But I think what we're trying to do differently is put out content, make the scheduling easier for the teams, make games, and just stay alive. And that's what we're going to do.
You said you got 22 teams that applied. Did you allow all 22 teams in, or did some get...
There were other teams that applied, but we decided not to go with them for whatever reason.
Do you want to share some of those reasons?
Not really. No, I don't.
We'll talk in the abstract then, because I think one big thing with starting team leagues is the concept of how do you get the teams into the team league? And I think it plays a big role in the success of the team league is Because if you don't have a good base of teams, your team league is shit.
Yeah, it's hard because I hate not allowing people to do stuff. Like I hated not allowing those teams to join because like when I looked at Clan Wars, my team wasn't invited. I hated that. DETL, there was no qualifiers. My team was invited. I hated that. So running the league, of course, you want it to be like, oh, everyone come in, everyone's equal. But there's certain cases where you got to look at what's in the best interest of everyone else, especially with like a giant prize pool. I want to take it seriously. I know that I don't usually sound like I take anything seriously, but I want this league to be taken seriously. So if there's a team that didn't make it in, it's probably because they tried to apply too late, or there was a specific reason why they didn't get in. But
yeah, I just wanted to kind of go back to a topic that we've sort of talked about a little bit, and I guess it's the all-kill style format versus Pro League style format. Was your decision to go with the all-kill style format heavily just based on like the fear of no-shows, or would you ever have like a consideration of going to the Pro League style format because
I've thought about it.
Yeah, because it's like for your objectives, it seems like it would be more beneficial because then it's not just, for example, week 1, you ended up fielding out exactly one player versus one step ahead, right? So one player gets that experience.
Yeah. Which is so good because nobody showed up. But yeah, yeah, it was one of those, first week, so everyone needs getting used to, right? There's some players that just forgot to read the memo and had work or something, or there's some people that just eat for 3 hours when they should really just eat for 10 minutes and show up, Yeah. There's different circumstances. I definitely wanted to do Pro League. I like Pro League format. I like Pro League format a lot, but it just seemed like all kill was just the right thing to do for season 1. It works. It has proven to work, and I had a different format entirely, something that a league in Warcraft 3 used to use, and it's so fun, but I didn't want to do that. Like, it's even more one player oriented than all kill. I can go into what that is if you guys want to know.
I'm interested.
Okay, so in Warcraft 3 there was a league called WCO. I think it was the Warcraft Olympics, and they had this weird format, but I loved it. So it was a champions format. So each team chose a champion, 4 players aside. So you have 4 players playing in this league, and they have one champion per team, and the one champion plays the 3 other players, and like each champion plays the other team's 3 other players, and then if it's still tied, the champions play each other, and it's really cool. But I didn't want to do that because it's not really fun to watch. It's not really fun to watch because sometimes if you have like a really good player, he just stomps all 3 games.
Yeah, there's also players are really, really aggressively against different things. This was one thing that showed in SC2CTL and Clan Wars and DETL for a little bit, despite Ravi's accolades to the contrary, is you put a different map in the map pool and players will cuss you out. They will add you on Skype and they will call you names. You change the format, they will come to your home and egg it. That's the one thing that I've noticed, and it's even the community does the same thing. The people who aren't players, they're aggressively against change, and it's really hard to balance that. How do I get my uniqueness of the league for a certain goal while also still having people not hate me?
Yeah. Well, I mean, usually you just don't care what other people think, right? Everyone's going to hate. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, for example, I ran second season of the Breakout Invitational. I got so sick of the map pool that I replaced 2 of the maps with just completely random. And when I say maps that had never been played on before, I mean they had quite literally never been played on before. And 2 days before the tournament, one of the players came up to me and said, "Hey, did you know that in the bottom left-hand spawn, you quite literally cannot build a gas geyser? Like, one of the gas geysers, you just couldn't build a gas geyser on." That's how unplayed these 2 maps were.
Like, it was bugged?
It was bugged. Like, at some point, like, for some reason, you could not build a gas geyser. And that's something that, like, if this was ever played in any setting whatsoever before this would have been discovered. But, like, it was discovered, like, 2 days before the event. That's just a testament of how unplayed it was. And I had these 2 maps in the map pool, and I will admit, in a sense, it was a huge disappointment because it very clearly showed that only maybe 2 of the players had ever really even bothered to check out the maps. or even play on them at all for even more than one game. But at the same time, I didn't get that same level of hate that it sounds like Troy got. But I think, yeah, it's sometimes you just got to kind of like disagree and commit.
To be completely fair, one of the maps I did add to the map pool was so grotesquely Terran favored in TVZ. When Widow Mines were still strong, you couldn't take a third as Zerg. So maybe there was a disproportionate number of Zergs threatening to tear my hair off, but I'm a Terran, so I love it. We had some pretty good discussion. I think for a bit of a summation, we should put the doctors in the house. Let's prescribe a good team league. Given the climate today, let's design a successful team league. Could such a thing exist? What would it need to have in order to be successful?
In my mind, I guess like there's a couple. It again, what you define as success comes down to your objectives.
I'll define the objectives right now. I think a successful team league is something that showcases for viewers, teams, and lends story to teams, gives value to teams in StarCraft 2. And from a player's perspective, it provides them a area to play in. I think a successful team league doesn't necessarily have to cater to players so much as it balances players with viewers. I think viewers are an important part of a successful team league these days because it's churn. It's the same reason why people argue that we need skins in SE2, a discussion we're not going to get into, but it's to motivate the churn, to get new players. And you're never going to get new blood on teams. You're never going to get new teams to form unless there exist teams in a team league that are getting watched. If viewers aren't demanding new teams aren't going to form.
I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're like a good reason right now. Why would you make a team right now? You wouldn't. Why would you? There's no reason, right? Like, there's no there's not no reason, but there's no like motivation.
Ravi, do you think there's motivation?
You're asking someone who quite literally still does not understand the motivation of teams to be generated or made in a general sense. Like I don't
All
actually.
right, let's calm the fuck down for a moment. What?
I don't. So to me, I think that with the state of teams as they are right now, I don't understand the purpose of a semi-pro team, because I understand the purpose of a pro team that has, evil genius lists of sponsors, and then the team in a sense becomes not only this ground for like potential like team house and that kind of stuff, but it is in a sense like an advertisement firm for saying like, hey, we have this list of like players that you can advertise on all of them as a one big old bundle. It's a selling point for the sponsors. You get advertisements for all of these guys. But for a semi-pro team that doesn't have like this big sponsor list or anything, I still struggle to understand, like, because the other reason I can think of having a team that a lot of people assume, a lot of viewers just assume this when it's really not the case, is that you'd have those practice partners. You'd be building that network. And the more I talk with players, the more I realize that's not the case, especially in the semi-pro scene. And I struggle to understand a lot of the time, like, what do the semi-pro teams provide?
Can I highlight the pure goddamn ridiculousness of the creator of Breaking Out arguing against amateur teams?
He's got really good points.
I mean, you need to have semi-pro teams in order to have pro teams. Where did the pro teams come from if they weren't semi-pro before?
That's true.
That's great, but for that to work, like, you think about. So I actually want to talk
Ravi's
about
got
this
a really good
quickly.
point. I have a lot to say about that.
We're getting. Oh, I really want to hear Ricky's thoughts as a team organizer. But
all right, we're gonna talk about why teams shouldn't exist, and we're gonna call it a podcast. So let's go. Let's dive in. Rip the meat off.
No, he's got a good point. I think a lot of teams at the start open their team in the hopes of becoming an evil genius. That's probably the end goal. So, like, not exactly to be evil geniuses, but I think that's the main goal. A lot of teams, though, like, in my opinion, I would not consider at least 80% of the teams on NA to actually even be teams. Oh, it's so hard, Ravi. That was so good what you said.
Ricky, what what teams, so this is my biggest problem with that. I like the whole idea of, because I agree, most teams, like I talked to very, very few organizers, and they say something like, oh yeah, I never want to aspire for this team to be anything more than it is right now. Like very, very few organizers will say that, right? You always want to aspire to bigger. But the thing is, I want to point out how few successes there have been in that regard. Evil Geniuses has been around for a very long time. They were actually a relatively big team before their endeavors in StarCraft. Of course, they became much bigger in StarCraft, but they were already fairly well established. Team Liquid, in a sense, yes, it was not like the enormous team that it probably is now, but it was still probably one of the biggest teams that existed in StarCraft before StarCraft 2 because of its standing in, the scene and everything. So many of the teams that come out, Complexity, Fnatic, you talk about like Alliance and stuff coming from Evil Juices, like a lot of these teams that are really big, or even the ones in Korea you could talk about, they were teams that were already big or started off big. Very, very few teams go from that semi-pro level and build their way up slowly over time to that pro level. Maybe MYI is probably one of the few exceptions to that. Flipside, for those who don't know and keep thinking like Flipside is this, super small team, they're actually a pretty big team. They're a very big deal in the CSGO scene, and they are considered one of the top teams there. So like, I really struggle. Like Root is probably the number one example that I can think of. That is a team that started off as a community like of friends and like that sort of clan feeling of the semi-pro scene. But even Root, I would argue, was actually like a relatively big thing at the beginning of the SC2 beta.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? It's also a lot of the players' faults. A lot of players, especially on NAGM, they really just look for a handout in any form. And those are just players that should never be on the team. And especially like teams that just throw out handouts, I don't really consider them even a team really, because if you take away the money, there's nothing there. Like if you took away whatever amount of money our team throws out, relatively nothing would change, because that's not the way our team's made. But there's so many teams out there that are just like, oh, I want that top 16 GM, I'll give you $50. And then they join, and then the second that $50 is gone, they leave. That's not a team, and that's what so many NA teams are. So that's why when I say like I don't consider many NA teams. That's why, because they're just run, in my opinion, different. Like they're not run like a team. It's just run like, it's run like a little fun club. Well, I'm going to have some fun for a couple months and then I'm going to die. But until then, it's not the way you should run a team. Mm-hmm. And it goes down to a lot of players too. A lot of players, well, I mean, I don't blame any player for thinking that he's worth anything. Like, he's entitled to think he's worth whatever and go after whatever he wants. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he should get that. And there's a lot of teams that just hand it out, and I don't consider those teams, and I don't consider those players worthy of being on a team, because they're not team players, and those are usually the players that make up like 80% of the teams right now.
They're not team players. I mean, that's such an atrocious thing to say in StarCraft. When you look at the top players, Nanua, he was on Alliance, and he went on record saying he didn't do customs with the EG guys.
Yeah.
I don't think it's at all reasonable to say, like, for example, you're saying the guy, he gets $50 and he joins the team, and then when the $50 is gone, he's gone. Yeah, sure. If my job cut my salary, I'd be gone too.
Right, but that's different though. I guess what I'm saying though is I don't agree with that method of running a team.
The function of a team is either to salary the players, and that gets you the team, or it is players, they're there on their own volition, at which point it's a fun club, which you're rallied against either way. I mean, you can't have it both ways. Yeah. Teams have to exist.
My understanding of what Ricky was saying about the whole, players are gone if they are, they stop receiving their funding, is that the teams aren't providing any other benefits. Right. And that is the biggest problem is, if, for example, we were saying like the teams are providing additional level of exposure. And actually, I'll even say like, being able to enter into additional events. Like if there were more team leagues and teams were consistently participating in them, well then, hey, you know what? Just that. I know players like, hey, Desro actually has constantly messaged every single person who has ever tried to run a team league and said, hey, I'm teamless. Can I join up with a team or something of the sort? Like, because that's a valuable thing, is like, hey, by entering this team, I can participate in another event. And, you know, maybe you're just looking for the experience and the exposure from the event. You're not even looking for money, but like there needs to be something else provided other than just that salary, I think, because the salary, let's be honest, it's honestly insignificant.
It is, yeah.
Even to like these high school kids that are playing StarCraft for fun on the side, $50, $100, maybe even like $200 a month. It's pretty insignificant for the time investment that these kids are putting in.
And it's not.
Is it really though?
Oh, for sure.
Well, I mean, I won $297 in a Playhem once, and I will tell my friends that I'm a pro StarCraft player.
But there's a difference, right?
I know, I
There's
say that like a
in
joke, but I mean, what about the guys that, for example, it happened in one of the SC2 CTL finals, Korean Air had to go cut the grass because his mom was yelling at him. If he had been getting salaried, he could have said, Mom, no, I'm a professional. I mean, even if the salary is the $50, $200, for people who are 16, that's something. They're putting some value, and to convince parents, I think there's a lot of value to
I don't
that.
think we're talking about 16-year-olds making $200 though. I think, I don't know, it's different. Like everyone has a different idea of what a team even is. Arguing this between us three probably won't go anywhere, but there's more to it than like to even treat it like a job. I think a team is like a family. Like a team looks out for each other, just ups and downs, you know, like they're there regardless. They don't just leave at the first sight of trouble. They work together to get better. That's how a team grows. And when you don't have that unity and you don't have everyone having each other's back, then yeah, I would argue that the people that don't have each other's back shouldn't be there because it stunts the growth of a team.
Well, okay, sure, but we should have teams. Everything you just described, having each other's back, being there for the ups and downs, that sounds like a good thing.
So I think that the thing that Ricky and I are trying to say is not that there is not a place for teams. We're saying that the current state of how teams are being run right now is questionable, is questioning the value that the teams are actually providing. Are they actually worthwhile as they are being run right now? I think both, I'm speaking a little bit on Ricky's behalf as well right here, but I think both of us will agree that there is a lot of value in a team that, you know what, I'm actually going to give I've been thinking about it for a while, and I want to give the shout out to a man named Travis, who runs Team Ascension, who I know occasionally Team Ascension has gotten some flack for, you know, players doing mischievous things, but Travis is probably one of the people that I respect the most in StarCraft, just because he runs his team amazingly well. He does that same level of community-ness, and he actually brings his team together. They have actual practices. He does things for the players, like when they have matches, he's reminding them a day before, an hour before, 10 minutes before the match starts, hey, you need to play in this match. He's actually, for those who don't know, and I hope that he doesn't get upset for me for mentioning this, but he does something that I'm in disbelief that more teams don't do. He sets up an entire Google Calendar, and every single time he finds anything, any tournament that his players could enter into, he adds it to the Google Calendar so that all of his players can immediately know, hey, I am actually free in like an hour for 5 hours. Is there an event that I can play in? They could go to this Google Calendar and immediately they can just look at that event, go sign up for it, and start playing it. It's a very, very carefree kind of thing. That's what the team is providing for those players at Team Ascension. And I think that is the kind of environment that a lot of people envision teams have, but they don't.
And when you put in that work as a manager, and then you look at a team that literally has a bank account of $500, and then they spend it all in 1 month and then die, how can you honestly say that they were a team?
Okay, now hold on. So first, Ravi, thank you for arguing my point for me. I appreciate it. You argued that Team Ascension, which is a team that is a community knit team organized by a guy who is by no definition a professional, but is putting in the effort and leading a team with a lot of value, and they are growing. They've picked up players from IVD when IVD disbanded. They're getting a lot of good players. They're opening a team house soon, TM. They're progressing as a team. Last I heard, it was
I thought they were all living together, though. What was that?
It could be. I thought they were just looking at real estate. Don't quote me on that.
I think they're looking at roommates. But anyways, move on. Yeah.
So you have this team that's on the astronomical path to the moon. They're progressing. They're undeniably semi-pro. And Travis is providing unquestionable value to the members of his team. Mm-hmm. And how can you look at that and say, well, I don't see the reason for semi-pro teams to exist?
That's not what we're saying. We're not saying semi-pro teams should not exist. We're saying there's nobody else. I won't say nobody else because there's probably going to be that one manager that's like, wait a second. But there's next to none.
Do you believe that any manager starts a team and says, hey, you know what I'm going to do? The bare minimum to provide no value to my players? I mean,
there's a lot of managers that don't even think about that, though. They don't even think like, oh, wait, I can tell my players that there's a match coming up. Oh, wait, I can remind them of tournaments. There's so many managers that don't even think about that. There's like, oh, wait, you want practice? I should go to Korea and talk to a Korean and get him to practice with you because you're bored. Or like, oh, there's a team league. I should maybe even sign up. Like there's teams that don't even think that though. So, like Travis is like a diamond in the rough compared to the other 80%. Like Travis is not the 80% that we're talking about at all. He's the exact definition of a team.
Well, the 80% of everything is shit.
What do you mean?
I mean, look at anything. Look at TV shows. Look at software. Look at houses. The majority of everything will be trash. That's why good things are good. Because if everything was good, everything would be mediocre. When everyone's super, no one is.
I don't know if that's so super relevant.
No, I think it's a different argument than what we're talking about. We're talking about just the frustration of who can call themselves a team. I mean, if you want to say that, if I got $500 tomorrow, opened a team, gave Dong Regu $300, gave 3 American players $50 each, and it lasted a month and then disbanded.
Hey, you wouldn't be the first person.
You're right, and then disbanded, and you're going to say, well, that was a really good team. If you want to say that, then you can do that. But as a team that's been open for 3 years, or a team ascension for 5 years, I think they're going to laugh at you. I think because there's so much more to that, and there's so many teams out there that are just one-hit wonders, and then they just die. And then they were like, oh, well, back in my day, I was a great team. Like, well, back in your day, you didn't do, like, I'm not going to put examples, but those aren't teams. Those are one-hit wonders. They come and go. Those are not the 20% teams out there that we're talking about. To be honest, like, I think the end goal is to always be sponsored, to be like the next EG in terms of like, can I make my guys do this for a living because this is awesome. It's obviously just a passion, and when you have a passion, you want to make it a job and you want to make it your life. So that's the point of owning starting a team, at least, is that's the beginning goal. But when you have your team and you start to like develop a friendship and you start to be like a family, and it starts, your passion becomes just your life, then it becomes more worth it. And like, esports is always going to be a money sink until you see some return. And, I wouldn't be surprised if like EG's still sinking a lot of money in, so like it's just like, it becomes a passion, and then eventually it just becomes so worth it. It's a new lifestyle, and it's just something that you like to do. And is it worth having a team? Absolutely. But for the right reasons, I think.
I think to follow up on exactly what Ricky was saying, my kind of closing thoughts on this whole topic is, if teams in the after hours gaming league that aren't being paid, they are doing this outside of their jobs, can form that kind of team bondship that we were talking about, that makes people want to show up for their matches and prioritize it. And I want to note, it's not just like people who are, full-time and then they just go home and they have all this time in the world. They have kids, they have families that they're taking care of, things that like a lot of responsibilities that like a lot of the kids that are semi-pros and up and coming, or even just pros in the Starcraft scene right now, do not have to worry about, and they still find the time to play in these matches. If they can develop that kind of team friendship, bondship, whatever you want to call it, and show up for their matches, why don't we demand that kind of same level from the people who are quite literally getting, even if it's small salaries, but they are getting salaries to play this game.
So I think a nice closing wrap up, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a sort of consensus we've reached that we haven't explicitly said is the foreign team league we're all hoping for, the Deimos Esports Team League, the IPL Team Arena Challenge, that's not what we should be aiming for anymore. We shouldn't be trying to build the next NFL, the next MLB. We should be trying to build the Little Leagues. We should be trying to build a league that is a collection of people who are all there because they want to be and to improve and to have fun. And the rest, the competition, the county finals, that'll all come.
I think
with that.
The point
Do you
of a
think that's
team
fair
league,
to say?
or like how can a team league be successful? Well, any team league, doesn't matter. Any league, really, is you have to appeal to every audience. You have to appeal to the team managers. You have to appeal to the players. To the team managers in terms of having a good format that is easy to follow, that isn't too much work, but is fun. To the players, that they can play games. It isn't too much of a hassle. It's not an inconvenience to their schedule, and their teams can actually help each other out in getting matches won. Like, you're really good versus this, you should play that. So all kill format's really good for that. And especially for your audience too. Like, if you're not a player, if you're not a manager, but you're just a fan, can you watch any match you want whenever you want? Is there a schedule that you can follow, that you can put in your own real life schedule? How can you get involved? And a lot of team leagues don't have coverage that's posted regularly, or even live. A lot of people don't have streams that they can watch. So many leagues fail because they don't have a way for anyone to know what's going on. That's why Deimos was so good. They had all matches streamed at a certain hour. You knew exactly when it was. They had weekly wrap-ups if you didn't check anything out. They had VODs if you didn't check anything out. Their coverage was almost always posted. The only downfall to them was they were not stable. Another thing to being successful is you got to be stable. You got to keep rolling. One wonder season is not worth 10 mini seasons. I would say, it's just true. So there's so many factors to running a team league, but the main thing is to appeal to every audience. Appeal to your fan, your player, your team, everyone, your sponsor. How can they watch it? Can they see social media? Can they use social media? There's so many different aspects, but you can't just look at it as, is this good for me? You have to look at it, is it good for everyone? And if it's not, try to make everyone included, because the more people that are included, the bigger it becomes, and that's that's success, I guess. And Dust League will be all of that soon.
Dust League Season 10 confirmed.
Dust League Week 2, tune in.
I was really hoping that you were going to say Dust League Week 2, confirmed, still happening. But,
confirmed, still alive. Confirmed.
Consistency. But yeah, I agree with a lot of what Ricky said. The only thing that I will say is that the one thing that I have a slight disagreement on with Ricky is that I think that appealing to everyone is important. You should always try and appeal to as many people as possible in that regard, like in terms of you want to be good to the players, you want to be good to the viewers, etc. But at the same time, there are going to be places where you're going to have to make a choice. For example, one of the most obvious examples that comes up that we didn't really even talk about at all for the team league discussion is team leagues are really hard to get a lot of people together for. So sometimes it's a lot easier for your broadcast to be done from replays. That is actually one of the biggest things. Even the wonderful Starcraft 2 team league, I think it was actually just called the SC2TL or SC2 League. The SC2 League, for those who remember In Control casting that was run through replays, entirely through replays, because it was much easier for the players, but it hindered the experience for the viewers. So there are things that you have to make decisions on. Like it's nice if you can appeal to everyone wherever you can, but there are going to be places you have to make the decision on, and those are going to be the hard places to make. You're going to have to kind of do gut calls on that as a team organizer. But one thing I will say is sometimes things do work out in terms of one thing that's good for example, the viewers is going to be good for the players. When you have things that increase the number of viewers, it increases the amount that players want to play in it. One player that in particular, I know I've talked about with him a lot about just things that can improve North America and everything. And he keeps telling me it's not about the money always. It's not always about the money or the incentives for players. That's not the only way to incentivize players. That idea of fame is what really drives a lot of players. They want to be playing on that big stage. They want to be broadcasted and, casted by day 9. They want, if you're in the After Hours Gaming League or something, they want to be the player that has that opportunity to get their name out there. Because let's be entirely honest, as fun as StarCraft is, there are a lot better ways to make money for the time investment you have to put in to make money in StarCraft. And that's one thing that I will say, is that if you can get good viewership, I also think that's a big thing for players. And that's why I think viewership is one of the most key things right now for just team leagues. Because if you want the players to show up, if you want the players to feel like they're invested in the team leagues and everything else, make them feel like there's going to be some payoff. If you're Henderlisk and playing in Shoutcraft Clan, or Shoutcraft, I think it was Clan Wars, or some team league a really long time ago that was casted by Total Biscuit, and you're Henderlisk and you nearly all kill Team Axiom, that means something. That people remember that. I still remember that as the moment that Henderlisk broke out and made a name for himself for people outside of Toronto and who were following the up and coming scene. That was a really, really big deal. People remember that kind of stuff. So those are the kind of opportunities that are only given by having a good viewership. So I think viewership is really important. I agree with Ricky for the most part, though, and I really liked his recap. I can't top it, but I can add to it.
The one final thing I'll add, and this is because it was one of the primary goals of StarCraft 2 Community Team League, and to date, I haven't seen another one besides the Chobo Team League replicate it, is fun. And I can't stress it enough. It was fun to play in my league because it was in the rules. If 60% of your team wasn't having fun, we would kick you out of the league. If you do not stress fun as an objective, people won't have it. If your competition is so intense that you're stressing the players involved, then they're not going to show up and play. And I think that was, I think that was one of the reasons that people showed up to play each week in season 1, was because of the fun aspect. And that's why After Hours Gaming League is so successful, because it's people in their high stress jobs. They go there and they have fun every week and compete as a team. And I think if you can match the fun for the players with a broadcast that gives the viewers what they want, I think you've got the recipe for a successful team league.